Welcome back, everyone. We're so glad that you are continuing to share this day of important information and learning and growing and friendship building together, all around changing the conversation about immigration. We have in this session an opportunity to hear from 4 of our representative agencies in a panel, and we'll be engaging in several questions with them, and we'll see if we have any time at the end for a question that might either come through our virtual group, and we're so glad that they are with us and continuing to be with us today. We also will try to give you an opportunity to ask a couple of questions of them as well. But let me say that I'm going to let you introduce yourselves this time. I'll just call on you by name and then let you introduce yourself, so that our first question is an introduction of yourself and the agency that you represent and your role with them. So let me begin with Madison.
Hello, my name is Madison Burke. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Migrant Services Coordinator at Church World Service Durham. I oversee the Immigrant Solidarity Fund, which is a mutual aid cash assistance fund for undocumented members of our community across the state that, since its inception in 2019, has distributed over $1 million in direct cash assistance.
I'm Brandon Dockery. I'm a congregational social worker with Faith Action, where I run the Strangers Neighbor program and also oversee our network of churches and religious organizations.
I'm Amber Diaz-Pearson. I am the Community Engagement Manager at World Relief Durham. Our office does direct services for refugee and other immigrant status persons in the areas of social emotional learning and academic support for children in the public schools, resettlement services for refugees and humanitarian parolees, and immigration legal services. And my department covers advocacy, fundraising, gathering material donations, and volunteer engagement, as well as church mobilization and engagement.
I'm Carolee Hall. I work with the North Carolina Council of Churches. And more specifically, I work with the Partners in Health and Wholeness Initiative in the western side of the state. But the North Carolina Council of Churches has a long history of working with legislative advocacy, around immigration, as well as developing faith-based resources. So we have a lot of different ways we are educating, inspiring, and mobilizing faith communities across the state towards justice. And I bring sort of a mental health focus to today's conversation with our workshop, and as we seek to equip faith communities for health and wholeness.
Wonderful. Well, we welcome all of you again, and I'm going to come back across, and this time I'm going to ask you, Carolee, if you would answer first. Would you share with us an experience of hope or an experience of gratitude that you've had recently in your work with persons who are migrants, immigrants, refugees?
Well, can I use today?
Of course.
I wasn't sure what to expect, and on the way over, I was thinking about, because she gave us a little heads up on the questions, and I was thinking about hope, and we have, we've had some good conversations and trainings with the North Carolina Council of Churches, but being here and the informal conversation, sometimes I think there's all this pressure to have these amazing presentations, but I know just in the first breakout session, my presentation didn't go anything at all like I thought, and yet I had such great conversations with a couple people that I felt like I learned and provided so much hope that we're all connected and we're doing this work together. So anytime I think that we can gather together and recognize that we're not doing it alone.
That is the lesson for me already today, that how many of us are already engaged in this work, but we may not know about each other's work. So thank you very much, Carolee. Yeah, Amber?
So one of our church partners sent their youth group over to visit us this summer, and the youth group brought a bunch of donations that they had collected, and that in itself was wonderful generosity. But what was more motivating, encouraging, hope-giving for me was in listening to our presentation on mass displacement and the situation that refugees and other immigrants find themselves in, the way these young people, 6th graders, 4th graders, 11th graders, were responding with passion and conviction that the status quo is not just, that we are called to justice, and that things need to change, and what can they do in their own communities, in their own schools to start making a change. And just seeing the energy of these young people was so hope-giving.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Amber. Brandon, tell us about it from Faith Action's perspective.
Good question. We see clients, I see hope all the time. And as part of my role, I get to sort of see the Immigration Assistance Center as an outsider, because I work from a different department. But I do get to sometimes help them with their cases, connect them with church resources. Hope so I see hope every day at work. But the latest, or probably best example, we did a festival for Spanish Heritage Month last Saturday at Westminster Presbyterian. And we had a lot of folks come out, and where the hope came was last couple months, our ID drives haven't had a lot of turnout. Folks haven't been coming to our ID drives. And the consensus was starting to be, well, perhaps folks are aware of this legislation that's coming down, HB 10, that will make all the communities, all the county sheriff, all counties, and the sheriffs of all the North Carolina counties cooperate with ICE. And right now, Guilford County does not cooperate with ICE. But after this legislation passes, probably next year, they'll have to start. Obama passed a bill about 2012 for immigration that was very similar to HB 10. And what it was basically a license to lock up brown people. It lasted about 30 seconds before the courts threw it out. However, the Supreme Court was a totally different Supreme Court in 2012 than it is now. So probably wouldn't have that same effect. So if this law does go into pass, it's going to be here for a while, and it's going to affect a lot of people. So we were thinking maybe that was the reason why folks haven't been coming to ID drives. So we have this event on the 23rd, and we would say, all right, we'll have 2 ID drives. We'll do one at 10, and we'll do one at 2. We might have 20 people. That day we did 96 IDs. We had 96 folks come from the Mexican consulate, from other consulates, and it showed me that folks are still out there. They're just kind of hiding right now. And that's hope. That gives me hope that we're touching more people than we thought we were. When you do this kind of work, you kind of focus on the things that you do wrong, and you focus on your missed opportunities, and you focus on the people you couldn't help. But it's good to sometimes see the people you can. And that's always a time for hope for me.
Hope in the moment, hope for the day, hope for the next step. Thanks, Brandon. Madison, tell us one of your stories.
I see a lot of hope. It's such an honor to be able to facilitate generosity and to provide direct cash assistance. The hope I feel, for example, my home church that I grew up in Charlotte recently gave generously to the Charlotte area Immigrant Solidarity Fund, and then I was able to take a client off the wait list who's a domestic violence survivor, an asylum seeker who walked from Colombia with her children to the U.S.-Mexican border and is making a way for herself in Charlotte and within a system that very much does not want to help people live full and happy lives. And so coordinating with her I'll be in Charlotte on Monday, so to be able to hand deliver the check and meet her, which is nice for me because a lot of times I'm working with clients over the phone or remotely. But that definitely gives me hope in hearing the stories of people who've overcome insurmountable odds, who are not just here, but who want to be productive, contributing members to our community, who have so much to offer, who just really want to have a chance to share the gifts that they have. So I definitely see hope every day in this project and in the work of all of my colleagues at Church World Service.
Super. Well, we've shared a few of the kinds of theological or faith traditional metaphors that bring guidance and perspective to us in previous conversations today when we do the work of immigration. One of the pieces that has been really important to me in recent days is the image of God as a migratory God, because God's message and presence always moving, and in whether it's Judeo-Christian or whether it is Islamic tradition, the faiths of Abraham have that image of Abraham as a migrant, and for Christians, Jesus as a refugee. So what are some of the stories from faith traditions that stand out to you, that hold space for you in this work?
So with me, when we're talking about immigration and faith stories, the big one would be Exodus. But to go past that, God has, especially the God has manifested in scriptures, Yahweh, he's made it very specific that he doesn't live in one specific area. He lives in the hearts of the folks that love it. Jonah is a little book about a reluctant prophet that didn't like folks that didn't look like him. He didn't like the Assyrians. They're a different culture, they're a different people, and they were a war people, and they were a conquering people. And he just thought this place would be great. The world would be better if God would just wipe them off the face of the earth. And what those little 4 chapters in Jonah show us is that God doesn't just belong to the Israelites. He says, and that book ends with Jonah waving his fist at God, mad that he didn't commit genocide. And what does God say? He says, you're mourning over a fig tree that was here today, not here yesterday, won't be here tomorrow. But these precious people that don't know their right from their left need me, and you want me just to wipe them out. And that's what that book, and that's how that book ends, showing us that God loves other nations, not just America, not just our nation, not just our religious expression either, but he loves everyone, and he is everywhere. I remember 2 Samuel talks about when David wanted to build God at the temple. He wanted to build the temple. And the prophet Nathan told David, he said, well, everything you do works out. God is with you, so do what you wish. That night, God came to Nathan, the prophet, and said, tell my servant Daniel this. Who told you to build me a house of cedar?
Solomon.
He says, I've never lived in a house of cedar, but in the hearts of my people. I've lived within my people Israel. So God is very much an ambulatory God. He used to live in a tent, but now he lives in our hearts.
Thanks, Brandon. That's a very, very helpful reminder. God is the God of all nations, the creator of all bloods, all blood. One blood, all nations. Yes, Amber?
Yeah, so, just as Brandon was sharing throughout Scripture, there are so many stories of immigrants, and I highly recommend Karen Gonzalez's book, The God Who Sees, to explore that further. But what I was thinking about this week, reflecting on Lynn's question, was how in Philippians 2 it says that Christ himself became a stranger for us, right? He laid down his privileges. He emptied himself to come and be with humanity. And as it says in Ephesians 2, it was so that those of us who were strangers, who were far off from God, could not only become people who moved from being strangers to citizens in God's eternal kingdom, but actually members of God's own family. And so to be a recipient of that magnitude of hospitality, I have to think, well, how can I live a life that's anything but overflowing with generosity and hospitality to the strangers and sojourners around me?
Thank you very much.
So do you want to come home with me, because I'm preaching on that passage tomorrow? Me too.
Let's talk afterwards.
For those of you in our virtual circle today, we just had comments from 2 pastors who are preaching tomorrow who want Amber to come home with them so that she can be a part of their preaching tomorrow. That's the way we make connections, right? And that's part of what it means to be involved and engaged in this larger work across many, many communities and across the country and across very different locations, even within one state. Let me ask another question as we're moving to thinking about faith traditions and the ways those become expressed in this work. Among the varied kinds of faith traditions with whom you are working, what are some of the best practices that you see coming out of those centered communities that are working in terms of interfaith, that are working singularly within their own community? What are some of the best practices you see coming out of faith communities that can lift us up and lift our eyes up to other possibilities today? Anybody can answer. Carrie, I'm going to turn to you, Carrie Lee. Anybody can answer, but how about Carrie Lee?
So let me make sure I understand. Best practices in terms
From a congregation or
from a
faith
congregation. I know one of the more recent events that we had with North Carolina Council of Churches that we helped to sponsor was the talking about the new initiative with Welcome Corps that the Biden administration has made possible in terms of you can now privately sponsor refugees, which is a new thing. And so when churches form you have to like form a team, right, to be able to do that. And so the best practices of seeing the intersectionality of that and the multifaceted way that a team can support refugees. And so, but it's just starting. So I don't know that I have like a best practice in terms of, but I think that offers a lot of hope for what it could look like, and creating multifaceted intersectional teams that want to see, that provide like this whole broad support system instead of just a couple people.
We just heard from the Spring Forest English as Second Language group the way in which ministry to help people learn basic survival English has evolved and morphed into multiple kinds of programs and intersections in one particular community's ministry. And earlier today, or yesterday afternoon, I guess, Deborah Coble was sharing about a church in Iowa where the women's group has worked with other women from other cultures for developing their economic base by sewing. They purchased sewing machines. So and then that begins not only the interrelationships with those groups, but that's the kind of thing that I can imagine, and out of the mental health piece that you're working on. Do you want to say a little bit about that and how that might emerge for communities as a way to engage immigrants?
Yes, so when we talk mental health and we think about, one of the things that we've talked about is trauma, right? And so my assumption is, and sort of the assumption that we have, is that a lot of times the people that are immigrants, refugees, we're interacting with them, and they have experienced trauma in a lot of different ways, whether that's before they migrated, during the process, settling here, living here, and integrate. And the way that trauma plays out and affects them in their lives has to influence how we work with them and the services we provide, and especially children, right? We're finding that if children experience adversity, it affects them developmentally and in lots of ways. And so the push to have trauma-informed ministries and organizations, and so that we have that lens through which we're working. So we're assuming that people are coming to us with trauma, and we're not wanting to re-traumatize them, and creating space for that. So
best practices in providing services for, and best practices in practicing the very thing that you're wanting to offer to them. Mm-hmm. Very good. Madison, did you want to say something about that?
Yeah, I think it's important for communities to be committed to the long haul, right, to long-term relationships. I think a lot of marginalized communities are used to different groups coming in briefly and then leaving, and not really being committed to those years, if not decades-long relationships. I think about Faith Action, over 25 years, and just like it's a big commitment, it's a long-term commitment, whether on like the personal or institutional or larger societal level. I think also approaching the work from a spirit of accompaniment and mutuality, trying to avoid paternalism, recognizing that all people, all communities have inherent gifts and talents and experience and knowledge, and seeing it as a partnership and how can we collaborate together. I think that's really important.
Yes, and actually your comment leads me to one of my other questions, which is, and I think I'd like to hear this from each of you. What would be your recommendations for persons who are making a commitment to be in this work for a long term and recognize that it's not just an in and out of my life with somebody else's life or their life in and out of mine, that when I engage, I may well be making a long-term commitment here, and how to sustain my own strength and capacity for continuing that engagement, but also what else do I need to be aware of in the long-term commitment. And so, Brandon, let's start with you, and then we'll come down and come back around to Madison, since you helped to bring it up in the first place. Is that okay?
Sure. What to expect? Well, whenever you're doing something like this, you count the time, and you measure success in epochs of decades, not necessarily months or weeks or even years. It takes a long time to make a little social change. I would say the biggest lesson I've learned as a congregational social worker, particularly as a congregational social worker, is to not give up and to enjoy the grind. Well, it's a big grind. Trying to change minds, it's a big grind. I make 50 to 60 cold calls to churches in Greensboro and High Point, Winston-Salem, a month, where I just kind of show up during the week and talk to the pastor and get talk to the staff and kind of catch people off guard, because when I tell them I'm coming, they tend to run from me. So I kind of pop up sometimes. And it's really encouraging to see folks that want to help, but it's also, there's a lot of folks that don't want to help. And there's a lot of folks that don't think that the church has a role in immigration. We need to mind our business and build a huge big wall with all sorts of evil stuff on top of it to keep people out. It's hard changing evangelical minds. I mean, poor Billy Graham, he couldn't do it. He couldn't do it. It's hard to change evangelical, but that's what we have to do if we want to change the way folks vote. One of the biggest groups of voters in America are the evangelical church. And instead of otherize them like we've done for so long and kind of sticking them, the ignorant people over there, it's time to engage them. Because you're not going to change unless we engage them. But engaging ignorant people takes patience and time. And Jeremiah had a hard time with that. And they killed him. So who knows?
You're not encouraging us.
Right.
Well, what did God tell Ezekiel? He said, I'm sending you to a hard-headed people. They got a forehead like an emerald, but I'm going to make your forehead like a diamond, harder than it, is what he told Ezekiel. So you got to be hard-headed. You got to be hard-headed.
Strength
That'd be my
not
advice.
from just inside ourselves, but strength from beyond ourselves, and strength together as we do this work together in community. Amber, what are your thoughts about this idea?
Yeah, the idea that if you're committed for the long haul, that means you're not going to create a new program or make measurable change overnight. That it can take time, and it can take time to change people's minds to get that buy-in to do the work that you believe you're called to do. And one amazing story that comes to mind from among our church partners is we have 4 church partners in the Western Triangle area right now who have set aside property that they own on either inside their church building or on their property that serves as temporary housing that they offer free of charge to refugee families who need temporary housing before they can get into a long-term rental. Well, one of those churches, when they first heard about this idea several years ago, the pastor was bought in, but he thought, I need to make sure my congregation is on board. And so he brought in the director of World Relief Durham, and they spent 8 months with the congregation, having meetings, answering questions, talking through misconceptions about immigration law and about who immigrants and refugees are and what the vetting processes are. All of that, just listened open-heartedly, answered the questions, and by the time nearly a year had passed and it came to a congregational vote, the decision to refurbish this house that was like an old parsonage into housing for refugee families was nearly or exactly unanimous among the congregation. But it took nearly a year of investment and really taking people where they were and not being angry at them that they weren't where we hoped they would be. And so realizing that if this is our long-term calling, then we can invite people to accompany us and we can start where they are and bring them along. And that with the work of the Holy Spirit, we can trust God for the outcome.
Thanks very much, Amber.
I would say in the long-term justice work, it can often feel like you're banging your head up against a brick wall. in terms of trying to advocate for change. And you're going to have wins and losses, and it can feel insurmountable in some instances. And that's why I think it's really important to sustain over the long haul of paying attention to the wins, right? And focusing on the good. And I don't know about y'all, but sometimes for me, especially if I'm feeling discouraged or whatever, like I have to have an intentional practice of gratitude. And because sometimes, even though it's like, yes, I hope my heart is always full of gratitude, it can start to wear down. And so if you find yourself in a place of discouragement, it's like, okay, every day for a week, I'm going to start my day with, here are the good things. Here is what's going well. Here is where I am seeing hope. And make that an intentional practice, because when we don't, we can find ourselves burn out.
I love that idea, intentional practice of gratitude. Madison, would you like to make the last word on this particular one? And then we have a question from our virtual family.
Yeah, I think this work, it has to be done in community. We can't do it alone. And I think our culture, our Main Street culture, often tries to isolate us and distance us from one another. And so finding support in each other, I think, is really key to long-term sustainability. And I think also finding the joy and the fun of it. Of course, there are hard moments and frustrating moments, but I recently was at La Fiesta del Pueblo, which is an event. It's the biggest Latin American-focused event in the Triangle region of the year. It's this massive festival. 25,000 people on average attend. They spend months and months and months planning it. And I was there representing the Immigrant Solidarity Fund, and I was near the stage where they had bands from all over the region for over the course of 6 hours, and just to see thousands of people dancing together, celebrating their cultures, and just seeing that immigrant pride and joy was really inspiring to me. And so I think finding community and finding joy is key to sustainability.
And I would just tag into that attending those events is a way in which we stay sustained, because we're engaging with a community that's not just our typical community for relationship, but really putting ourselves with others in a way that makes there's lots of joy to be found in sharing another's point of view and another's points for celebration. So thank you all. Beautiful ideas. So Lisa, you have a question from someone in our virtual community.
Give me 1 minute, I've got to unmute and get the question.
Okay. We're getting a question from the virtual community, and then Lisa will share it with us.
I'd like to get your question. I'm going to have to repeat it. Okay.
As we wait, perhaps you're thinking of a question yourself that you'd like for us to ask.
Could you tell me how to pronounce your name correctly, please? Sadiqa Ahmed. Basically, wants to say that we need to focus on common religions, and I'm getting feedback here. Yeah. Okay. Hold on. All right. I'm no tech person. She says that we need to focus on religion and the commonalities of the religion. And Sadiqa, would you please elaborate on that? No, I'm going to have to repeat. Just give me a couple of sentences and then I'll repeat them. Yes. Yeah. Okay, hold on a sec. The best practices are to focus on the similarities of faiths rather than the differences.
Thank you, Sadiqa.
Because that will help connect communities together.
Yes. Thank you very much. Focusing on
Thank you.
similarities rather than differences in our faiths, helping to strengthen communities. A wise word for us all. Thank you very much. Let me ask one other question that wisdom prompts us toward. What's something you have learned about building relationships with others that has really kind of helped carry you through and exploring those things that where we are alike rather than focusing on differences? What's something you've learned about building relationships that's very important to you?
I'm happy to start.
Sure.
So at World Relief, we talk about our hope for partnerships between volunteers and newcomers is that those relationships will be mutually transformative. And to me, that is another way of saying that we're building true and authentic friendship. We're bearing each other's burdens. To enter into that kind of true friendship and authentic relationship means that there's this kind of vulnerability on both sides, that it's not some well-resourced person with a savior mentality coming in and trying to help someone in need, but it's recognizing you are a person who is fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God, and you have gifts and talents and hopes and dreams and abilities. And what can I learn from you? What can I share of my life with you? What are you going to share of your life with me? And how can we do life together and build something better together than we could ever have accomplished on our own? And from that kind of relationship between two people to see how community can build out and become life-giving and a place of flourishing for everyone.
Very helpful. Coming to engage with one another out of spaces of humility and curiosity, coming to engage with one another out of already knowing that there's something I'm going to learn from you by just being with you. Beautiful. Anybody else want to comment on that? All right, let me give you another question. What would be something that you would say, all right, let's do it this way. If you could only do one more presentation on immigration, if you could only do one more presentation, what would you want the focus of that to be, and what would be the one thing you would absolutely want people to take away with them from that presentation?
That's a hard one.
Is that a hard one?
I don't want to keep talking too much, but I do have an answer.
Okay, well, maybe that'll inspire the rest of us.
Okay, so immigrant equity is the phrase that I would want to focus on because we've already talked today in the various presentations from our friends at Faith Action, the very real challenges that immigrants from all over the world face, whether they have refugee status or not, in terms of language access and the barriers that not having access to resources in their own language can set in front of them and prevent them from reaching various milestones related to a driver's license, employment, getting a job, accessing fair and reasonable medical care, and so forth. And so recognizing the ways that we can take action in our communities locally, we can challenge our state legislature to take action to provide better language access across a variety of areas. And one in particular is having the knowledge test at the North Carolina DMV translated into more languages, in particular Swahili, French, Dari, and Pashto. Making that change would open up resources to hundreds more, thousands more immigrant neighbors who have come here to North Carolina just in the last couple of years, and ensure that they're able to safely drive, safely follow the laws, and be able to provide for their families in that way.
Amber, that is really, really helpful because it helps me to consider a couple of other areas that I perceive for myself are important. One of those is learning the vocabulary around immigration. So immigrant equity is a key phrase I will take away with me today. A second piece that I'm curious about are what are the things that I can do as a resident of North Carolina, and I can write my state legislators and ask them to really push for driver's license tests to be written in other languages and name those specifically. Right? That's an action I can take. And a third piece that it helps me to think about is something that I can do within my own local congregation or faith community in a way that helps get others involved in the same kind of simple act. That's a kind of another one step forward. So thank you for both the answer to the question, but also the extra pieces within it. So what about some of the others of you? Is there something that you would say is the one thing that you also see? Because there's always more than one thing, right? We walk around these issues with multiple perspectives. So what else?
I would focus on the individual stories, focus on sharing stories. I think when people hear of such big issues, it can be easy to forget that behind every individual in the stat, there's a unique story. And I think when people, I know for me, Indy's story was super moving. And just, I think it can help people who might not have the context or the full understanding think, oh, that's not, if I was in their position, yeah, I'd probably try, like, who wouldn't do everything they could to provide the best lives possible for their children? And then I think just driving home that it is in all of our best interests to invest in having flourishing, healthy communities where people are not just working to survive, but can work towards thriving. And so I think making that investment now as communities brings huge dividends in the long term. I have seen stats on how much more would the GDP grow if undocumented folks were given full access. And I don't believe in valuing people just by how much they contribute to the GDP, but I think it is important to realize that these changes are in all of our best interest.
Relationship, and the stories that go with those. Thanks, Madison. Very, very helpful. Well, let me double check the time here. Yes, you have another one?
Just have a comment. Deborah found online that you can request an interpreter from the DMV. Do you know anything about that, Amber?
So yes, you can request an interpreter, and they're supposed to provide it, but to have the knowledge test itself written in an accessible language makes it much easier for people to be able to.
So you're saying that they're not totally excluded, but it's just would make it easier. Okay.
We've heard that a lot of folks will download the Virginia study guide. That's in that language, but they're learning the Virginia rules of the road for the North Carolina test.
That could be scary, having lived in Virginia for 10 years. Let me ask each of you, we have about 5 or 6 more minutes. Is that right, Lisa, where we are? Okay. Let me ask one more question before we move to lunch. Everybody here today is here because they are, and I know this without even having talked to everybody, right? They're here because this is something, an area of practice and relationship in their own communities in which they're highly interested, wanting to learn more, or are already engaged. What would you suggest is another thing that folks can take back from today to encourage and draw others together for some really concrete actions? And let's just go right down the line. Was it Carrie Lynn?
I think part of it is recognizing, sort of taking an assessment of you as a person and then at your organization, and recognizing your position of privilege, power, whiteness, and how you can leverage that to advocate for somebody else. And it can be sometimes at least for me, it can get overwhelming when you don't know how to start. I know I was doing a chaplaincy internship at a women's prison, and at the time, the person was this particular girl that I was working with. She was the youngest inmate at the women's prison in Atlanta, and her family were refugees. And I felt like, I mean, I didn't have any legal training, but I felt like she probably wouldn't have been there if she'd had like an actual, like the resource to get a good lawyer. But that's another thing. But anyway, she wanted to get her GED so that when she got out, she would be, the same place as her peers. And for whatever reason, every time she tried to go and get the person to sign her up to take the test, they just kept giving her a million reasons why they couldn't do it or she couldn't, all this stuff. And literally, one day I was like, all right, I'm gonna go with you. And we walked in there, and magically the lady just signed her up for the test. But to me, that illustrated the way that like you sometimes have to accompany people and use your position and privilege and power to hold other people accountable. And so that's sort of a tangible way. And we can look around and find those situations in those places. So.
Thank you. Amber?
Yeah, I think that for many of us who passionately desire justice in our world, it can sometimes be overwhelming to see the scope of the problem, to realize there are 108 plus million forcibly displaced people around the world today. And that feels overwhelming, and what on earth could I do that would be any more than a drop in the bucket? But to me, the takeaway I would want to share with you is that if you are a person of faith, know that God holds each one of us accountable for the sphere of influence and the level of authority that each one of us has in our own lives. So you don't have to solve the problem of world peace. You just have to look around your neighborhood, your children's school, your workplace, where you have influence and authority, and ask, what can I do to love a new neighbor and to show them generosity and welcome? And as Jesus tells his disciples in the parable of the talents, we're responsible for what gifts and resources and abilities we've been given, as Carolee was saying. And so know that you can use whatever power you have faithfully and well, and that both honors God and honors our neighbors.
Thank you, Amber. Brandon?
My answer to probably the last two questions would be stranger to neighbor. As far as changing the minds of people, particularly congregational type folk, church folk, stranger to neighbor is the best program out there. And not just because it's my program, but because I've seen a lot of programs that try to bring communities together, and they all fail at certain levels. So what Stranger to Neighbor does is it will equip your church to not only meet and greet and welcome new people, part of your community, but it will also teach those of your church that participate in Stranger to Neighbor. Not only will they learn about immigration, but they'll also learn how to be welcoming. They'll also learn how to accept folks of different views and different backgrounds. I do a lecture on culture. The main reason anybody has a problem with anybody else has nothing to do with politics or race or religion. It's all much deeper than that. It's culture. If you you can't understand anybody without understanding the culture that they're from. So all these differences that we're having with folks from different nations, even folks from America in our own backyard that we don't understand, it's because we don't understand their culture. What Stranger to Neighbor does is it will teach your church about culture, about immigration, and it will equip your church not only to do a service project for the community for $2,500, but it'll also equip your church how to think in regards of helping our newest neighbors consistently in the long term. So if you want a church that is active, more active than it is now, Strangers to Neighbor is a great program, and we've really gotten it off the ground this year. We're going to have 7 pairings be started by November, we're doing 7 pairings. That's 2 more than we've done completely. We've only done 5 pairings in the last 3 years. However, this year we're doing 7 just in this fall. So it's really taken off. love for you to be a part of that work.
Brandon, is there information on your table?
Huh?
Is there information on your
There's
table?
information in my table, and there's about 40 cards in my pocket.
Okay, great.
So
Sounds
I'm
good.
going to be handing these suckers out. Give me an email, and we'll definitely set something up. I love to give tours of my offices. I also love to come and talk. As a trained, seminary-trained homilician, I can not only talk about faith action, but I can give full sermons. So if you want to maybe have a Sunday off, and where you don't have to pay the speaker,
Do you drive to Oriental?
huh?
Do you drive to Oriental?
I'll drive anywhere you want me to, friend.
Thank you, Brandon.
yes.
Thank you. Madison?
I would be remiss to not share about the program I'm representing, which is the Immigrant Solidarity Fund, which I really see as an investment in our neighbors, taking the chance to show material support to our undocumented neighbors. And so one step today could be considering a gift directly to the fund, but also, I am one person managing this statewide project, so I really need community support, and it really is a grassroots coalition building project. And it can be $5, it can be $10, but the microgrants that we give, we've helped recently arrived asylum seekers put down deposits to secure housing for them and their families. We've helped people continue to pay the bills while they're dealing with wage theft cases. We've helped people put a dent in medical bills. We've helped people keep the lights on. We've helped people, feed their families when a loved one's been detained or deported by ICE and they've lost that income. And so I've got tons of flyers on the table. I'll be presenting here after lunch. But I think if you're looking for, a small, immediate, low time commitment way to make a material impact in someone's life, I would invite you to consider a gift to the ISF or to amplify it within your personal and professional networks. And I've had folks burst into tears over the phone when I tell them, yes, we approved you for a check for $1,000.
Thank you, Madison. I want you to join me in giving thanks to our panelists. And thanks for our virtual community and for the questions and comments that have come from them. I'll close this and then I'll turn it to Lisa, okay? Just one second. I want to just have you go, as we head toward lunch, I want to remind you that after lunch you have another mini workshop, and we are here in this room with Church World Service.
Madison.
That's Madison, yeah. I mean, I knew it was Madison. I was just trying to make sure I named the right agency. So Church World Service, and we are here in this room for them. And those of you who might be going to the second presentation for English as a Second Language, it will be downstairs in room 1. Follow Elisa. She'll help you. When we come back after the second workshop, we'll have an action planning time. And I want you to carry with you what you heard in these last comments about using your position, power, privilege to walk alongside even another person. What you heard about using your gifts and talents right where you are in community with others, that makes a difference. One drop of water at a time fills the bucket, right? Makes a difference. And what you heard from Brandon for a very specific program, an opportunity to do some transformative learning and education with the folks in your faith communities, and then from Madison for a way in which you can make a material difference by investing in this microloan fund. Those are 4 excellent ways we do this. Lisa.
Just want to acknowledge a couple of people. I'd love for you to meet Shireen. She is our caterer today. She has, I'm going to let her tell you about her business, just very briefly about the way that she employs refugees in her business, and just a little bit about herself.
Hi everyone, my name is Shireen and I am originally from Egypt, and we have a business called Delicious by Shireen. We started our business 7 years ago to support refugee women in our community. I'm from Winston-Salem, and they are amazing. people who love what they are doing, amazing chefs, amazing moms. And because of our work in our community, we get highlighted in Forbes magazine, and alongside with different acknowledge from different social media. And we are having today Mediterranean rice, chicken kebabs, and we have fattoush salad and baklava with the walnuts, and we have sesame cookie. I hope you will enjoy it, and please don't forget to take our card if you know anyone might have an event, or any of your churches have event. We will be happy to come and serve you, and I hope you will enjoy the food and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, Shireen. This has been amazing. I know the food's going to be awesome. And also, she would like to be in partnership with folks to put refugees to work. So this is her calling. So let's support her. And I just want to give a shout out to 3&3 AV, Stuart and Holly over here, who are doing a great tech job. Even with all the tech difficulties, they've just been doing a great job. So let's eat. And folks who are virtual, we'll see you back here at 1 o'clock.
May we offer an open-eyed prayer of thanksgiving and gratitude. So look around the room, look at your open hands. Into these hands, we have received grace and gift after gift after gift, holding them lightly and offering them back to the one who created us all. Looking into the eyes of those who are around us, and as Lisa gets to look into the faces, or at least see some of the folks who are joining us virtually, we give thanks for these, all of whom were created in the image of God. And what these hands will do as we are nourishing our bodies at the table, we give thanks. And what these hands will do as we go forth from this place, serving together, we give thanks to God. Amen. There are display tables for Neighborhood Seminary and for Spring Forest and Hope for Humanity in here and down in the hallway. There are display tables from our other sponsors and presenters today. Please, after you enjoy some lunch, be sure and explore the tables. Thank you both so much.
We are circling together. We are singing our heart song. This is family. This is unity. It's a celebration. This is sacred. We are spiraling together. Onward, inward, creature to creation. Holy mystery, Mother Earth, childbirth. This is Mother Nature. This is sacred.